because Mr. Mondale is talking about balancing the budget by raising taxes in 1985, which would exacerbate the unemployment conditions in the country. It would increase the deficit and slow down the recovery. Ronald Reagan said, we don't need to raise taxes, we need to cut spending and lower unemployment as a means of balancing the budget. And so I think we have a clear choice in 1984, or 1984 for 1985, and I think the American people, on balance, at least in the Newsweek poll that was released today, 65% of the American people came down on the side of the issues that Ronald Reagan was talking about, and only 35% with Walter Mondale.
I think in one respect, Florida State is a big game for Auburn, but it doesn't carry the same kind of weight that a Florida or Georgia or Alabama, because it's a non-conference game.
Sugar Bowl's not involved.
Right. At the same time, it's a prestige game from a national standpoint. And of course, Florida State's got national championship aspirations too. So, you know, we're in a situation to where if we could win it, it would certainly put us back in the hunt for the high finish as far as our total season is concerned.
Last year's Florida State game is one that Auburn linebacker Greg Carr will always remember. The Tigers had just taken a lead on a Randy Campbell pass to Lionel James, but the Seminoles, with Kelly Lowry throwing, had marched right down the field and were at the Auburn 26 with a minute to go. A field goal to tie, a touchdown to win. That's when Donnie Humphrey pressured Lowry's throw on first down, and Greg Carr stepped in front of the throw to end the Seminole drive and give Auburn its most thrilling victory of the 1983 season.
I would think that since they've looked at that several times that they remember your number. Does that bother you?
Well, I don't think it really bothers me. I know that if they're going to be blocking on me this next Saturday night, they've got to get past our defensive line first, and so I have it makes me feel good right there, because not many teams have been able to get past our defensive line because they're playing such outstanding football this year.
Let's see, 3-2. Line in the left field. That's a base hit. Whitaker is to third, and Graham is sending him in to throw to the plate. He's in, and it is 1-0 to that he is. Line drive down the right field line and going into the bullpen. Garvey will score. Here comes Nettles to the plate, and he scores. Right down. And the chicken is here. Get the Tigers even. Drive to right field. Gwynn going back to the track at the wall. Gone. And there's the home run. 3 balls and 1 strike to count. And that's the two. Back with a third. The relay to Whitaker. Whitaker to Castillo. They got him. He stumbled. Little ground ball to first. This ought to do it. Bergman to the bag, and the lights go out on game 1 in San Diego. Jack Morris goes all the way. Retires the last 6 in a row. He was threatened. The Padres had him on the ropes, and he had the ability to get off the ropes, and they couldn't put him away. The key plays again. They left Gwynn at second.
in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. And they'll be joined on the float is that this November, we not only get to select a president.
He just loves all-American sports. He really enjoys going jogging with my father in the mornings. He loves to go boating with the whole family. He's a real family dog. He's a very loving and affectionate dog.
Of September is the date that I have on this copy, and I have that actually.
Attorney General, maybe that's where it needs to be directed. If there's no way we can take some sort of
Progress on that, and this, could explore that.
You want to make that motion?
I so move.
You make that motion, you want a second?
I'll second.
This law, I mean, it was passed, and the law was passed.
And the operation, without we take some action, so the department at this time is prepared to go forward with action to the day that we have. It's not a matter of simply the department making one request to this.
Aren't they great? As you may be aware, the search is the largest grand prize winner. To cast a vote,
He just loves all-American sports. He really enjoys going jogging with my father in the mornings. He loves to go boating with the whole family. He's a real family dog. He's a very loving and affectionate dog.
Threw the wrong leg in here, and now the practice tells it. Till one day a rabbit hit him. Broke
Congratulations to you. Here's a plaque.
Chuck is If you were anywhere near downtown Montgomery, you might have noticed the silver and blue train streaking through the capital city. Amtrak personnel are riding the rail from Birmingham to Mobile to determine how the miles of track have fared during the 5 years since the company has serviced the area.
We've been very pleased with the quality of the Seaboard System tracks that we have looked at both yesterday and today, and basically have found a rail plant that's in excellent condition.
If Amtrak is to return to South Central Alabama, the U.S. Senate must approve an appropriations bill to give the state matching funds. Needless to say, company officials are hopeful the bill will make it through. The Alabama Rail Transit Commission says the passenger service will give consumers another option as to how they travel through the state.
We have the New York to New Orleans Crescent service, which is currently serving Anniston and Birmingham and Tuscaloosa. I think if we can get this route in, we're going to have a pretty good rail transportation system, at least in the lower two-thirds of the state of Alabama.
As it gives us another transportation option to bring tourists from the upper Midwest or the northeastern states into our state. And frankly, we need as many options as we can so that we're not totally dependent on one mode of transportation.
Dean Argo, WSFA TV News.
Presented by the goals that those major corporations have. Listening to the person. We got West Jefferson, Limestone. We have nothing. I've always looked at Alabama as one state that I could say there's others worse than us. But very frankly, in the visit I had here to Alabama a few weeks ago, as I toured institutions and talked with staff, I didn't find an area that I felt that Alabama had to look back in anybody else in the nation.
Today have the best correctional system in the entire nation.
I think that maybe Alabama is a I've seen the act. I haven't read it in depth, but I've talked to a couple of the guys.
Come on. You
The mill workers spent the better part of their lives working in the Dan River plant in Greenville. Now they say they have trouble breathing and are easily winded. Dan River says the workers' lung problems are not connected to their long exposure to cotton dust. For example, one of the men who's suing, Lonnie Hilliard, worked in the mill 53 years. He's 69 years old, and a doctor describes him as severely impaired. He's also a very heavy smoker. Dan River argues that cigarette smoking might have caused Hilliard's medical problems. Experts for the mill workers have testified that cotton dust does cause health problems, but Dan River is prepared to challenge that. It's as if a scientific controversy has moved into the courtroom because some scientists don't believe cotton dust can lead to chronic lung disease. A pioneer in this field, Dr. Robert Schilling of London, is testifying for the workers. The trial is expected to last several days. Susan Silvernail, WSFA TV News.
This is one of the largest crops of marijuana that we've found in our county since I've been sheriff. Looks like it's going to cover an area of about anywhere from 15 to 17 acres. The amount of plants is going to run into probably several $100,000.
No, try not to get him in that. Cook it up, put it in a sifter, and sit it out. All the strength goes from the roots back down.
It was on July 9th when security homeowner Jeanette Brown was arrested on assault charges for allegedly beating and burning an elderly resident of the home. That same day, an official of the Department of Public Health inspected the home and cited a number of department violations. Guy Nevin's report led to today's administrative hearing to determine whether or not the operating license of the home should be revoked. Today, Nevins testified that a number of violations, which he found in February, had not been corrected on his second inspection. He testified the home should be closed. But Nevins also testified Ms. Brown denied any part in the burning and beating of 77-year-old Ruth Briggs. Dothan attorney Dan Whitehead served as hearing officer. He will make a recommendation to the State Board of Health on whether or not the license should be revoked. Ms. Brown remains free tonight on $7,500 bond after pleading not guilty to the assault charge. She will be back in court next week on a defense motion to move her criminal trial out of Dothan. Cal Calloway, WSFA TV News, Dothan.
Money from the extra penalties will go to the commission to be distributed to those injured as a result of a crime or to victims' families. Under the Victims' Compensation Act, judges must add additional costs to court expenses. Montgomery County Circuit Court Clerk Debbie Hackett explains how it works.
We collect court costs on each case when somebody is convicted unless the judge specifically waives the payment of court costs. When somebody is convicted of a felony, the docket fee that makes up the court cost is $117, and out of that, $15 on a felony goes to the Victims of Crime Compensation Commission. On a misdemeanor, the fee is $60 or $65, and out of that, the $10 goes to the Victims of Crime Compensation Committee. And then on traffic offenses, $2 out of the docket fee goes to the Victims of Crime Against Compensation Committee. And we collect these, and at the end of the month, we disperse, to various agencies, and one of them, we disperse whatever amount is to go to the Victims of Crime Compensation Committee.
The commission is expected to begin making cash awards to victims in December. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
It will help, and it'll firing people up in a way, but we need a win real bad. It doesn't matter who we play. I think we're looking at this game not as a grudge match or anything like that, just we're wanting to get a W up.
All right, now listen.
Mike Roberts inherited a losing program at St. James, but after a 2-7 transitional season in 1982, Roberts guided the Trojans to a 6-4 mark last year. St. James is unbeaten in 6 games this year. A 50-7 thrashing of Marion Institute High last week improved the Trojans' record to 6-0.
Coach Roberts, he come in here with a stern hand and really put the rules down and said this is the way it's going to be. Really got it together.
Garner is part of a defense that has allowed its opponents just 8 points a game. The Trojans, meanwhile, are scoring at a 31-point clip. Tailback Johnny Redding has rushed for more than 100 yards 5 times and has scored an incredible 13 touchdowns in just 6 games. But any great back is only as good as the line in front of him.
The backs have run real hard, and I think it's been the sweeps and the inside plays that have gotten us the most yards. The offensive line's been coming off a whole lot harder than they have been.
This week, Class A and Area 9 supremacy is at stake when the Trojans host Highland home, a team they've been fortunate enough to spend 3 weeks preparing for.
I think what we've got to do is just not be intimidated by them, which I think we're past that point. And we're looking forward to a good ball game.
One more time, last play, 4th and 10, 4th and 10.
Alabama trailed 34-7 going into the 4th quarter, but Walter Lewis led a stirring Tide comeback. A great catch by Jesse Bendros, and the Lions' lead was only 34-28. With time running out, Lewis drove Alabama downfield again, finding tight end Preston Gothard for the apparent go-ahead touchdown. But no, the officials ruled Gothard was past the end line when he gained full control of the ball. The Tide cried foul, but to no avail. Gothard likens the media attention he received this week to that of the president, but the play brings back memories he'd just as soon forget.
Well, I'm trying to, I've been trying to work that thing out of my mind because it got real old.
We really felt like that, the game was taken away from us, but yet, we put ourselves in that situation by playing bad.
I don't think that we as a team have the type attitude that's going to be a real big motivating factor. I'm certain that it's in our minds, and we're still disappointed with the way it ended. But
Auburn and Florida State was another close one a year ago. The Tigers drove 84 yards in the final 2 minutes, scoring on 4th down to take a 27-24 lead. But the Seminoles still had ideas of pulling the game out. It wasn't until Greg Carr intercepted a first down pass at the Tiger 26 that Auburn had the game put away. Carr feels like a marked man this week.
I know that if they're going to be blocking on me this next Saturday night, they've got to get past our defensive line first, and so it makes me feel good right there because not many teams have been able to get past our defensive line because they're playing such outstanding football this year.
In the top of the first inning, with no score in the game, Kirk Gibson of Detroit sends a single into right center field. Lou Whitaker, as he did the night before, would score the first run of the game. It was 1-0 Detroit Tigers. Ed Whitson, Padres pitcher, would not finish the first inning. Darrell Evans, a little bloop route into short left. Gary Templeton can't get to it. In to score is Kirk Gibson. The Tigers with a 3-0 lead. Padres trail 3-2. Terry Kennedy, perhaps the key play of the game, a sure double play ball. It short hops off of Whitaker. That will put a couple of runners on and would bring up the surprise hero of the night. For the next man up is Kurt Bavacqua. Bavacqua, who had been involved in a bizarre play the previous night, tonight comes through with a 3-run home run to deep left field. The Padres take a 5-3 lead. I'm George Michael for NBC News.
Bush Middle School, in front of Route East. Middle School, Mobile County School, C.H. Blagger High School, Superintendent Abe Hammond. Mountain Brook School, Mountain Brook High School, Superintendent Darrell McLean, Principal Timberland Norris. Be it further resolved as Alabama.
The shooting death of 37-year-old James Floyd this week is believed by police to have resulted from an argument between he and 22-year-old Willie Scott. Floyd's killing is the 16th homicide in Montgomery since the first of the year. Police spokesman Major John Wilson says the incident is part of a grim set of statistics kept each year.
In 1982 we had 24, 1983 we had 24. So far this year we've had 16. 5 of those white on white and 11 were black on black. We still have the holiday season to go, which usually seems to be the worst time as far as homicides are concerned. We don't foresee it being as large as it was in 1975, which were 50 homicides.
Wilson says law enforcement officials have noticed a slight decrease in murders locally since the death penalty has been reinstated. He says that appears to be a deterrent to some who might consider murder as a means to solve a problem.
Montgomery police officials say they expect, in addition to the already grim murder statistics here in the city, the expected number to rise to 24 by the end of the year. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News at Montgomery Police Headquarters.
The director of the Federal Bureau of Prisons, Norman Carlson, came to tell the Alabama corrections experts something they already knew. The amount of prison and jail space in this country is limited.
We obviously can't go on locking up first-time car thieves and check forgers and other minor offenders for 5 or 10 years and expect to have the scarce resource of prison and jail space available for those who truly need it, for the violent, for the dangerous, and the major narcotic traffickers who, as we know, prey on many citizens, young and old alike.
But Carlson also brought along some ideas for correcting the problem. Among them, uniform sentencing guidelines for all judges and redefinition of just what is overcrowding.
I don't think we have to take overcrowding on face value and assume it's necessarily evil. I think there is a level of overcrowding that we can manage effectively and yet can operate institutions that are constitutionally acceptable in terms of the standards laid down by the courts of this country.
Prison experts say no matter what is done, the problem of overcrowding will probably be with us for a long time, at least through the 1980s and maybe beyond. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
The thrill of victory is fading for these newly elected officials. Since October 1st, they've been dealing with the reality of public service. Council organization, audits, banking, the role of the city clerk, all these subjects cropped up today. The experts answered questions, and the new officials were glad.
It's been invaluable to me today. I've picked up some things I was unsure about.
I think it'll mean a lot because it's my first time as mayor. There's a lot of things we need to know, and we're trying to start all over with a new group. I think we've got a very interested council, and we've got a community that's interested too. And
by giving us the place to call and telling us the things that we should be familiar with will allow us the opportunity to learn a lot faster, I believe.
The League of Municipalities president, who doubles as the mayor of Gadsden, says there's a real need for this information.
I remember 10 years ago when I got elected the mayor of Gadsden, I didn't have the slightest idea of what to do. You know, you're there, you ran hard and you got it, and then you sit down at that desk and you say, well, now what?
35% of Alabama mayors and 48% of the council members who began 4-year terms this month have never held office before. But Means says when these rookies leave the Civic Center, they'll be better equipped to serve the voters who elected them. Lynn Sampson, WSFA TV News.
do have some good news today, and I wish Bill Richardson were here for you to applaud. And to thank our media, who is going to report for the Prattville area and Autauga County, and Bob is the group vice. The other person is Mike Jones. He was right over here a minute ago. What happened to Mike? Mike has been in charge of, during the next week or so, go out of your way and thank him. He's paced this campaign within this group from its inception, and he really deserves a pat on the back along with you provide to Group 1. Group 1 special employee is John Edmond. John Wadsworth, who is going to report for
This means that Alabama has the strongest and the most stringent laws dealing with the disposal of hazardous waste of any state in the nation. And this should relieve the minds of a lot of people who have been worried about the situation at a mill.
These kids are excited, and who can blame them? After all, it's not every day the First Lady of the United States visits your school. Mrs. Reagan came to the school to talk about drug awareness, participating in a 30-minute program with 17 students from the Birmingham area.
I'm Nancy Reagan, and I represent trying to get kids off drugs.
And the First Lady, a former actress, took to the stage again for a little role-playing.
Mrs. Reagan, I want you to play the teenage girl. Oh, of course.
Mrs. Reagan came to the school to talk about drugs, but when a reporter asked her what her husband's administration is doing to stop drug abuse, she ventured into politics.
I was a little surprised at Mr. Mondale's comments the other day in saying that they weren't, that the armed services were not involved. They have been since the beginning. FBI has been involved. We have task forces in all the states to try to interdict drugs coming into the country. We're doing a lot and have been doing a lot all along.
Mrs. Reagan says she's taking such an active role in the drug awareness program because she wants the next generation of kids to be drug-free. Well, it's a safe bet that this generation of kids at Pratt Elementary School won't forget this day for a long time. Terry Stanton, WSFA TV News in Pratt City.
For 4 years, Gail Parker worked as the Montgomery County License Inspector, a job she was appointed to by then-Governor Fob James. But in February 1983, newly elected Governor George Wallace and his Revenue Commissioner, James White, gave that job to a woman who had worked in the Wallace campaign. Ms. Parker went to court.
I figured that you didn't have to be a party to the any candidate or any political party for that, as long as you were doing your job.
In a 16-page ruling, Judge Thompson said replacing Ms. Parker was the product of patronage, a decision her attorney, Julian McPhillips, says will have a revolutionary impact on politics as usual.
Because now, somebody running for governor cannot reward his friends and punish his enemies when he comes into office by taking away jobs and doling them out to those who helped him on his campaign.
Judge Thompson's ruling implies there are some positions where party or candidate loyalty are essential to confidentiality, like cabinet-level positions. But McPhillips says this sends out a message to be cautious about the many other political appointments, a warning Governor Wallace's legal advisor doesn't agree with.
Instantly, it won't go beyond the individual case, I don't believe. In the foreseeable future, it could reach to other license inspectors, but I do not think that this is a significant ruling as far as the ramifications.
The Wallace administration hasn't decided if it plans to appeal, but says that is likely. In the meantime, this decision means Ms. Parker gets back pay, another state job of equal value, and the first shot at taking the license inspector job back should it become vacant again. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
But with respect to the second attack, I was in favor of tougher retaliation, because there we knew who had done it more or less, and because we had forces actually in the field. The other hand, it occurred at the same time as the Grenada operation, and we did make one retaliatory strike. I'm very impatient with the critics of the third attack, because you can't expect the president to sit in the White House office, the Oval Office, reviewing all the security arrangements for every embassy around the world. And suicide attacks are very tough to stop. Enjoy an introduction more.
Awfully glad you're here.
It takes no great insight. If one knows anything about the destructiveness of weapons, to be against war, and to run around self-righteously with placards proclaiming this fact is to make no contribution whatever to either peace or progress. The challenge of our age is to be for both peace and freedom, to be against war, but to stand for justice. If one does not do this, the world will be dominated by the most ruthless and the people most willing to invoke the threat of force.
The Vols have used the big play to post a 3-1 record. Last week, running back Teddy Fike hauled in this screen pass from brother Mike and raced 50 yards to set up a touchdown in the Vols' 24-14 victory over Meridian.
We have not been able to take the ball and just drive it down the field like Jeff Davis' teams have in the past.
Moving the football has not been a problem for Prattville. A key, though, for John Glasscock's Lions could be how well they bounce back after last week's heartbreaking 20-14 Area 7 loss to the Lee Generals. Running back Anthony Bullet Bishop has caught the eye of J.D. coaches in Lion game films.
It's got to be a quick eye to catch him as rapidly as he moves. He really is a good back, very elusive, and, you know, we've told our defensive players they can't relax for 1 second. Anytime Prattville snaps the ball, they're liable to score.
Although just 10 miles apart, the two schools have not been on the gridiron since 1971.
We used to play Prattville back in the late 60s and early 70s when we first opened, and we've, you know, made some efforts to play one another over the years, and things just hadn't worked out. But, you know, it's a natural game. Here we are just across the river from each other, and we think two good athletic programs, and so it should make for a real interesting ball game.
Another Thursday night matchup has the Lee Generals at Dothan, a game with playoff implications for Lee. The Generals are 4-1, coming off that big win over Prattville. The Tigers are only 3-3, but whipped previously state-ranked Carroll 28-6 last week. Dave Cody, WSFA TV Sports.
These are the sights and sounds that greeted the men in the 27th Bombardment Group when the Japanese attacked the Philippines. Suffering from illness, lack of food, and ammunition, the Americans were forced to surrender, then endure the Bataan Death March and life in a prisoner of war camp.
This way and you know.
For some of the men, it was their first meeting since being liberated from the POW camps in Japan 44 years ago.
Come on, Slug, you got it. Grab each other and start crying.
And just as emotional is their memories of what happened to fellow soldiers when they couldn't keep pace in the death march.
The Japs ordered graves dug and rolled those men in it and made the prisoners bury him alive.
The men of the 27th knew about survival before their surrender. When their supplies were cut off, the airmen of the 27th were turned into infantrymen and had to improvise to turn aircraft machine guns into weapons that could be used in the field. This reunion isn't about the despair and degradation these men suffered on the march and in the prisoner of war camps. It's about life, living together, brotherhood, surviving. Don Phelps, WSFA TV News on the Military Beat.
Everybody that was connected with it in any way, from the mayor to myself to the staff and people who worked it all along, were between surprised and shocked when it didn't happen, because we had every assurance talking to people that it was in good shape, on track, no trouble, a green light, just waiting for a signature, and then the signature didn't come. And so we're back to square one, and we're having to re-huddle and come up with another plan.
Recovered on those search warrants were several items indicating a bookmaking operation and all gambling records. These gambling records indicated this was a major gambling or bookmaking operation, several $1,000s a day being involved. Also was recovered several lists with names of bettors, phone numbers, addresses, etc. Mr. Lane was charged with possession of gambling records, Class A misdemeanor, and promoting gambling, kept Class A misdemeanor. This time, he's presently out on bond.
That a Macon County Greyhound Racing Commission be established, and those members, Mr. Sherling, come within the purview of the Alabama.
Well, as I look at this one, and then I'll
sever all of his personal friendships.
He'll do just what he
Except
says.
this is not a grant.
Further discussion? In other words, I'd let him take my.
It's governed by the Macon County.
Just tried to turn the draft on the fact that these two things came together in October of 1984.
Now, I don't want to be said, early.
More often than we ought to. Well, J.D., this is a time I guess you've been waiting for 20 years. Thank you. As I always say, it's mixed feelings.
Jim Junkin, Bill Clark, several other people, Bonnie, so forth around. If I skipped anybody, I'm sorry.
Always mentioned my girl.
Rod get you in trouble like you and I did then. Yeah, you caught one. I did all night. Right now, you go. I forgot about that. You mentioned it the other day. Tell them how much longer you got.
think he'll have much more speed than Johnny Jones, but I don't think he'll run any harder than Johnny Jones.
How about Eric Thomas as some of the quarterbacks you've faced this year?
Well, I don't know too much about Eric Thomas. I heard he was a pretty good passer. He do a lot of rollout, and you know, he's not like a Bernie Kosar who's going to throw the long pass as much.
I think their run complements their pass, and their pass complements their run. When you think you have them in a known situation, they come out and do something that you're not even expecting. And I think the best way to stop a team like Florida State is just play aggressive football and stay after them for the duration of the game.
I feel they're hitting some what you call not much of a Doug Flutie, but he'll find his receiver and he'll pick the secondary off.
He's playing on a very high level right now. I think the key to their entire football team, though, is their defense. Their defense is much better and playing much better at this point in time than they were last year.
1-2. Fastball, high drive, goodbye. Ball 4. And they all move up. Padres trying to hang on. Breaking ball in the dirt. Kennedy can't find it, and everybody moves up 90 feet.
Make his change if his pitcher's ready, and he already got the sign that he is. Here he comes. Many times when I was playing, the manager would say to me, just go out there, and when the umpire would start out, I'd say to the pitcher, let me know when he's coming, because I'm not out here except to tell you that you're out of this game.
So Dick Williams will be bringing in.
Pitches Game 3 for the Tigers. Tim Lawler deals for the Padres. In Detroit, I'm Fred Hickman for NBC News.
There were essentially two events underway. One, American and Japanese businessmen trying to improve trade, and two, a presidential campaign highlighted by last night's debate.
I just had a good feeling about it.
But the vice president was asked to deliver a nonpartisan speech, but even he admitted that would be tough, especially since he was talking about an administration position on import limitations.
If our economy were to any large extent shut off from the rest of world trade, these industries and their workers would suffer far more than they're suffering now in this period of adjustment. They might have a bigger piece of the pie, but the pie itself would be a lot smaller.
Whether his wandering into partisan issues upset anyone didn't seem to matter, because the motive of the southeastern states in inviting Bush wasn't to offer any endorsement, but rather to build up their own effort.
You see, the ambassador from Japan to this country spoke yesterday, and by the vice president being invited, it gives a lot of credibility to the Southeast Japan Association, because 30% of all investment from Japan is in 7 southeastern states.
For Wallace, the event was a success, and for Vice President Bush, it was a good chance to campaign even more for the current administration. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News in Birmingham.
High school action from Greenville's Tiger Stadium with the Stanhope Elmore Mustangs. Stanhope was ahead by 6 in the second quarter when a penalty gave the Mustangs possession after a punt. Stanley Crawford started the drive with a first down run off tackle. Crawford's run set up a fine pass completion for Murray Wilson to split in Dave McKee. After a Mustang turnover, the Tigers were driving with less than a minute to play in the first half. Junior fullback Johnny Powell's run ended the first half for the Tigers. Greenville went on to win over Stanhope 19-6. Homecoming just across town at Greenville Academy, the Colts of Hooper made it against the Tornadoes. Hooper's Greg Olive brought his team inside the 10 early in the third quarter. Moments later, number 42, Scotty Kelly, bolted in to give Hooper the lead. The Tornadoes would come back to tie the game to make the final 7-7. Jim Jackson, WSFA TV Sports.
The vice president was leaving a rally this morning in Port Elizabeth. Bush was shaking hands with supporters when he, apparently not noticing our camera, leaned over to one of them.
Oh, God, he hurt you. Turn that thing off the record.
Governor Wallace says he's feeling fine and expects to be back at work in Montgomery next week. But before he headed south, the governor introduced Vice President Bush to members of the Southeast U.S.-Japan Trade Association meeting at the Birmingham Civic Center. Afterwards, Governor Wallace told reporters his stay in the UAB Medical Center didn't slow down the day-to-day operations of the governor's office.
I'm a policy man. I'll set the policy, and we got the budget being written. I've got the trust fund being worked up. I'm working on the time frame for the beginning of dredging the channel. And I'm working on a plan to save all these funds to use the interest on them and not spend into the principal.
The governor got in several plugs for his plan to invest the state's latest oil lease bonus money and use the interest to help run state government. But the governor quickly ruled out a special session for that purpose, saying it would be too expensive. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News, Birmingham.
Enjoy an introduction more.
Awfully glad you're here.
To either peace or progress. Challenge of our age is to be for both peace and freedom, to be against war, but to stand for justice. If one does not do this, the world will be dominated by the most ruthless and the people most willing to invoke the threat of force.